unite and work together if we're all going to get through this.
Sounds like socialism to me.
The amount of people I see talking about socialism positively is actually staggering.
Do you think, do you really think that a proletarian revolution is just around the corner in America?
Grab your pitchforks and stab your mayor.
Your hero, Obama.
He's not my hero.
How heroic he comes
idiot. If Bernie Sanders were president, right, and he wanted to bring the same ideas as for socialism into this country, do you think that we would benefit?
Yeah.
But I just told you Venezuela's eating rats.
But I just want people to have health care. I don't want,
Same thing Hugo Chavez.
Oh my god. You people have, worms in your brain, honestly.
All right, welcome to this week's episode of the Sensible Socialist Podcast, a podcast for the rational left. I'm your host, Kevin Gustafson, and with me this week is my friend and comrade, Sarko. Sarko and I are both in the DC branch of Socialist Alternative, and we've had many wide-ranging discussions, and I've had the feeling, and I think she'd agree, that we haven't really seen eye to eye on some pretty important issues, namely the issue of race and the race class issue, and sort of what maybe takes precedence, or how we should know where to put these kinds of things. And look, as a white guy who's originally from Minnesota and a black woman of recent immigrants living in the DC area, we've obviously had different experiences in our lives, but we've both ended up in the same organization. We have the same political and geographical communities that we're involved in, and in many ways we share the same goals. But we've had a number of problematic discussions, and what I thought would be beneficial to do, I don't think that we're alone in having this misunderstanding or disagreement, and to me there needs to be much more of unity among especially black and white people on the left. And I think as a black woman, Sarko has a perspective that is important to listen to and to learn from. And so what I wanted to do was to actually have that discussion on the podcast, because I think many people are having some of these difficulties and would benefit from hearing it without having to go through the sort of emotional and social weight, I guess, that these issues tend to bring up. So I want to bring you my conversation with Sarko real quick, just on the issue of going to news. I've been saying that I wanted to just kind of bring up some interesting news that happened each week, and this week it was totally taken up by the Kavanaugh hearings. But one thing that we heard that was cause for celebration was that Amazon decided to raise the wage for their employees to $15 an hour. That covers temp, contract, and full-time workers, which is good. But we should be honest, two things to take into account. One, they did eliminate the stock grants and monthly bonuses, which could mean that for some workers, the wage increase amounts to a decrease in the total amount of money that they actually get. And so it's not exactly perfect. But second, we should understand that this was not done through the benevolence of Jeff Bezos. It was done because there's been concerted efforts, organizing efforts at a number of different institutions, as well as even a segment on Fox News that was criticizing them for paying their workers terrible wages and having them go on social benefit programs while the company is the richest country in the world. The richest company in the world. So I think, it's important to remember that Jeff Bezos doesn't deserve the credit for this. The workers at Amazon factories and people like Bernie Sanders, who were proposing legislation to actually make them pay for all of the public services and things like that the employees were to get. So though it is cause for celebration, there was a raise at America's second largest employer. The first largest employer hasn't had a raise. That's, I think, Walmart. And it wasn't as if it was done through benevolence, and it wasn't perfect, as some workers may see less in their pockets. So, keep a level head when it comes to these kind of announcements. Second thing is just Kavanaugh. Kavanaugh was confirmed yesterday, the 6th of October, and is now going to be on the Supreme Court. That just goes to show you that though there were massive amounts of protests and important things to see in the resistance against this, that are the Republic of the United States of America is not very receptive to the demos, the people of the United States of America. And so we really don't have a democratic republic anymore. If we ever did, we absolutely have a republic, and a republic is always by, for, and of the rich. But when it comes to Kavanaugh, look, I posted this on social media, but Kavanaugh is an entitled, unhinged, lying, predatory member of the bourgeoisie, carrying all of its entitlement towards women and workers and the inevitability of their positions of power. He's wholly unqualified for the job of a Supreme Court justice. He's never tried a case. He's never represented anyone in court. He was a judge's clerk who got promoted to the bench by George W. Bush because of his political hackery during the Clinton impeachment and his assistance and approval of the Bush-era torture program. While it's certainly, this whole issue with Kavanaugh is certainly about the accusations against him by Dr. Ford and others, and it shouldn't be ignored, neither should his wholesale lack of qualifications. So even if he wasn't a sexual predator or a bad drinker, which he appears to be, he's still completely unqualified. So all right, with that, I want to give you my conversation with Sarko, and so here it is. All right, so I'm here with my friend Sarko. The reason that you and I are having this conversation is based on what I would say is a number of disagreements and or misunderstandings, depending on how you want to look at them, about issues that I think both you and I are fairly passionate about, and that I'm not sure that either of us fully understand what the other one's position actually is, and so it's a fertile ground for misunderstanding, and it's caused some heated conversations or arguments in things like branch meetings for the organization that we're in. And so I think in particular the sort of genesis of the wanting to have this conversation, and it was a while ago, but it was I had responded to a post that you had done, or you had written when Erica Gardner died. And I, to be honest with you, I don't remember the exact specifics of what my response was, but it was not, I guess I'd have to defer to what you think about it, but I don't think it was an appropriate response, or was one that was kind of like, what the fuck? And so I thought it would be helpful to have an in-person conversation about it. And so that's it. But what I want to hear is where you're coming from, so that it's properly framed.
Yes, no, I think that's good, and I'm glad that you laid out your perspective on this conversation. So, for me, I feel like it's less that we misunderstand each other's positions on race or on class. I mean, I think we have some disagreements, but I think the wider kind of issue of race and how it is tied with capitalism, I don't think there are too many disagreements between you and I there. I more see this as behavior that is kind of representative of the weakness a lot of these socialist organizations. And it's just more of the way you've shown up when these issues of race have come up. And, I sent you kind of a quick list of themes for this discussion. Yeah. And I think those themes are really, there are the different interactions that you and I have had where they've been rougher, I think really exemplify those kind of things. So that's more where I'm coming from. Okay. some bigger philosophical discussion about race and class and what it means, and looking at the current. I'm not really coming so much as like, I am a socialist and here's my perspectives and analysis on this particular topic. Mm-hmm. I'm more just coming as just me and things that I have seen and that I have felt, not only with you, but just kind of what I've been seeing of these socialist organizations. Mm-hmm. And I really wanted to have a kind of a micro level talk, because I think with socialists it's very easy to get really big and to talk about the larger issues and societal, and those are important, but those are happening through micro one-on-one interactions that you and I have had. So that's more where I'm coming from.
All right. I think that's good, because I am definitely guilty of, in some ways, immediately going to like the 30,000 feet and not sufficiently appreciating, in some ways, the value and the power of one-on-one interactions and how much that expresses your overall perspective and how you are, like how you, in some ways, it's an expression of how you think about the person that you're talking to. And if the larger goal is to create an understanding or to get someone, for lack of a better term, on your side, the way that you communicate and what you're communicating and what you choose to spark up about begins to build sort of a certain perspective that other people have, that oh, well, I don't really like this person because of the way that they jump up when this one topic gets, okay. I want to hear the perspective that you have, because if I look at myself, I don't see myself sort of engaging in or attempting to like only spout up on questions of race, and I try to have as consistent a perspective as I can, and I think that it's that the perspective is at least all encompassing or at least able to sort of be seen by everybody. But I don't know. It doesn't. If I'm not expressing that, or if that isn't actually the case, I don't want to hear it.
Yes. Well, let's do it, because it was important to me to understand, like, why did I come on this podcast to talk to you? Like, why are we having this discussion?
Yeah.
So I want to just start with the first.
It's all good.
I want to start with the first branch meeting in which this really came up. Mm-hmm. All right, so flashback, December 2017, all right. My house, living room. Okay. And so we were playing this like end of the year game where we choose topics out of a hat, and then we were just going to give like 2-minute perspectives on it. So of course I pull out of the hat identity politics. And so this is what I said. I said, yeah, I'm really starting to understand more why these socialist organizations don't have a lot of Black people or people of color in them. I think there's a disconnect there with how we communicate about identity-based, oppression, something, blah, blah, blah. That's how I feel. I understand. I'm starting to get it. Ooh. And then... And then Kevin comes through and it's like, oh, well, this is identity politics. It's just the worst thing. And it's just really bad for the left. And we have to care about the truth. And this is one of your patterns when this discussion comes up, the truth.
Yeah.
Trademark the truth by Kevin. We need to care about the truth, and as Marxists, and then this and the truth. And then it went into the I, me's, and I's. I went to a meeting and they didn't want to listen to me because I'm white, and that's fucked up because I am a Marxist and I know this stuff and I'm speaking the truth, and they didn't want to listen to me, and I am working class and I worked in a factory, and I and me and I and me. And it kind of just sucked up the rest of the room, or the rest of the space in the room there. And then, yeah, there was no more time for the branch meeting. So that was that on that. So somehow my statement about how socialist orgs aren't good with people of color and Black people, and I'm starting to understand that more, a year now of being, a socialist and organizing. And it turned into a thing about you and the truth. And you worked in a factory. So that was the first one, but whatever. We go and chill afterwards. Second meeting where this kind of happened, March this year. And we were talking about gun control. Yes. And, I remember for that branch meeting, I don't know much about gun control or gun culture in this country. So I was just kind of staying quiet, hanging back, just listening to what people were saying. And so we're having the discussion, everyone goes on stack, and it's pretty much discussion time is done. So I just want to have a quick, last comment. And I said, this isn't a fully developed thought. And when we don't have time to go into this now, but there is certainly a link between the gun culture in this country and the people we're seeing perpetrate these kind of horrible mass shootings. We had this meeting shortly after a mass shooting. But there's some link to whiteness there, and to, I won't say white culture, but the phenomenon of whiteness. And so then Kevin was like, whoa, wait. It's important as socialists to care about the truth. The truth, with the class and the race thing, the truth. And then you went into some wild, super niche example of like a Black capitalist with a white limo driver with tinted out windows and gets pulled over. I don't know. It was something crazy. We were all just not getting it. And we weren't really fucking with that example. And you didn't get a chance to finish it, which you didn't like. So that was that on that conversation. And so afterwards, I had to really look back to get my receipts. Okay. You messaged me after that meeting saying you felt, quote, very ostracized, not appreciated, disrespected, and unfairly treated. And so I responded and said, quote, I think your approach and articulation ends up sending the wrong message. And you responded with, quote, while I genuinely take what you say about approach and articulation on my end, I only want to say that I, with all humility, don't just think this is a problem with me, that your approach and articulation can also send the wrong message. So that's when we were like, all right, let's have this one-on-one. And then it just kept getting rescheduled, and here we are finally having it. But there was also a meeting in May where we were talking about the French general strike. And again, I don't know much about that strike. So I was just hanging back, just staying quiet, learning. And I remember, of course, you knew a lot. I think you had listened to a podcast about it too. Yeah. So you had a lot of detail. And you're like, yeah, like, next time with this kind of strike, like, we need to build barricades and it was the biggest strike, blah, blah, all this stuff. And so I'm sitting there thinking, like, how does this go down in our society right here, right now, how polarized this country is. And so my comment, which was again towards the end of the discussion time, was, I just, France in 1968 didn't have the same kind of racial tensions that we have here in this country. And that's something that we need to think about when we're trying to apply this to, like, right now, right here. And guess what Kevin talked about? The truth. The truth. Okay. What else? Some tirade about the truth, some tirade about it's not reasonable to be prejudiced when we're talking about Black people being prejudiced against white people. And I can't even remember the details. It just took up the space. We ended up spending the rest of the meeting on this discussion and couldn't really move on. And that's another one of those meetings. So, okay. So those three branch meetings in particular were like, okay, and this is a phenomenon. This is just like the manifestation of the larger issues that we're going to see with a lot of these white socialists out here. And I want to go into that, but I definitely want to bring up the Erica Garner post. Yeah, because that was bad. That was bad. I also have that receipt. Okay.
Yeah.
You're like,
absolutely.
I don't know exactly what I said. I'm like, I do.
Better, yeah. I'd rather, yeah.
Let me tell you something. I reactivated my Facebook and went back on to retrieve these receipts. Real.
All right, let's hear it. Let's hear it.
I just found out one of my friends is dating someone. I was like, oh shit, things are still happening on Facebook. Okay. So this is me. Picture it. December 2017, right? It's very close to the end of the year. Yeah. Erica Garner dies after giving birth.
And this is before some of those meetings, right?
Yes, before the meeting. This is before the meetings.
Right, okay.
And because when I was looking through my replies, I was like, I was very patient.
I'd be less that now.
That would happen now. I don't know if my responses would have been as accommodating. Okay, so I post, I'm on a bus from New York City coming back to DC, and I'm just saying that Erica Garner died. It's cold as fuck. That's what I remember. So I post, there's nothing I can say about Erica Garner that hasn't already been said, and honestly her death has me pretty emotional, and I'm not trying to get upset on this bus ride home. All I will say is that her death, when she died, how she died, will be a lesson I will never ever forget about how anti-Black racism kills people, particularly Black women in this country. And then I quote an NPR article, and it says, according to the CDC, and I just want to go ahead and pause and say the CDC, as in the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the public health resource of this nation. And the reason I'm going to highlight that point is because, we'll
get there.
Okay. So according to the CDC, Black mothers in the United States die at 3 to 4 times the rate of white mothers, one of the widest of all racial disparities in women's health. Put another way, a Black woman is 22% more likely to die from heart disease than a white woman, 71% more likely to perish from cervical cancer, but 243% more likely to die from pregnancy or childbirth-related causes. What's more, even relatively well-off Black women die and nearly die at higher rates than whites. Researchers say that widening gap reflects a dramatic improvement for white women, but not for Blacks. It tells you that you can't educate your way out of this problem. You can't healthcare access your way out of this problem. There's something inherently wrong with the system that's not valuing the lives of Black women equally to white women. So that's the post.
Yeah, the proper response to that is, yeah.
Right. You know, a like, react.
Right.
A sad face react.
Right.
A heart react. Those are all good reactions, especially on Facebook.
But my response is...
So this is Kevin. First of all, I'm terribly sorry to hear about Erica Garner and the struggles of her family, though I can be sure their experiences are not only theirs, but those of millions of others. You really just white all lives mattered Erica Garner's death right now, because it just became like...
I did mean millions of others of Black people. But that's okay.
Millions of others. Yeah, I just said millions of others.
Right, okay, sorry.
Black is missing. So, that said, still, I would be curious to see the same study if they use class, socioeconomic factors, they'll say, which I assure you they did. There's no public health research that doesn't look at that. Anyways, given the invariable tie between race and class in this country, it seems clear to me, this part kills me. It seems clear to me that the underlying cause of this disparity comes not from animus by doctors or other healthcare personnel, but the capriciousness and callousness of a system that forces those who cannot afford access to what healthcare systems and schemes there are to find their own way.
Yeah, what? So I'm curious what, like...
The reason it kills me is because that... I'm sure this disparity doesn't come from animus, from doctors and other health.
Yeah.
That's wrong. That's wrong. There's so much research that shows how much inherent implicit racism is present in our healthcare system, not just on a structural level, but the doctors themselves. This phenomenon we're talking about of Black women dying from childbirth, getting sick from childbirth, part of it is because doctors don't give a shit about us.
Do you think it's the primary part of it?
It's not the primary, but this is absolutely a big part. So just maybe there you were trying to say the one underlying cause. And do we want to boil it down to all of that? I mean, I guess you can say, yes, this horrible system of capitalism, but no, especially when we're talking about Black people in healthcare, animus and capriciousnness. Look at your SAT words.
Is it yeah, I mean those are legal terms. But did I say not by, or did I say less by? Because that would be pretty important.
Comes not from.
Not from. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I see. That's a language of saying it's excluding the possibility that could be part
like
of it.
that's not a part of it,
right. Okay.
when that's absolutely a part of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a long response because that's usually how you roll. It's a long response.
I'm very worried about being misunderstood.
Okay,
it's usually digging myself into a bigger hole, but yeah.
No, that's fair. That's fair. So some blah, 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 yes, whatever. It's pretty much, it was just class. This is a class thing and capitalism and blah, blah, blah.
Can you read it?
Sure. Okay. Animus by doctors or other healthcare personnel, but the capriciousness and callousness of a system that forces those who cannot afford access to what healthcare systems and schemes there are to find their own way.
Yeah.
Usually that path leads to a grave. So while we mustn't forget about the race/class nexus, we must also keep in mind that the root cause of stats like the ones mentioned here are a reflection of a class-based denial of good care, which has, because of the nexus, racial disparities for sure. But this disparity specifically is not caused by racial divisions alone or racist thoughts held by people, but rather class divisions that exist and perpetuate in society. In this case, though not all, addressing the class issue will rectify this disparity, though others will be less easily addressed by the end of the class war. Still, the tragedy of America, both racial and class, is no better represented than in the struggles of the Garner family.
So I absolutely take the point about the sort of the proper response just being yeah, but then if you're going to respond, to not respond with the kind of exclusionary language that sort of directly contends with the claims of the study that you posted. But with the rest of it, do you take issue with the rest of what I said? Because you did, in describing it, focus on that part that I agree and I will admit is not properly stated. But the rest of it that you went, well, blah, 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 blah. I mean, is that, has what's written at the end there been sullied, been sort of dirtied by what was written above it so that it sort of doesn't count as much? Or do you disagree with it? How do you feel about the rest of it?
No. I mean, with the rest of it, like I get you, Kevin. Mm-hmm. Like, there's a race class nexus.
Yeah.
And even though, and I think maybe where we prioritize class and race is a little different for the two of us, because I see them as one and the same in this country.
Okay.
But I understand that there's a larger, deeper system of class antagonisms that has birthed all of these things.
Yeah.
Like, I get it. I'm also like emotional on a bus ride home.
Right.
And going like it just
I understand.
Yeah. And it's very much trying to, it sounds like you're trying to minimize the race aspect of this issue.
How so? I'm like genuinely curious, like how.
But this disparity specifically is not caused by racial divisions alone or racist thoughts held by people, but rather class divisions that exist and perpetuate in society. It's like, okay, yeah, I get it, yeah, the racism, but like clearly if we look larger, this is what's actually happening here.
It seems to it sort of is a very quick class reductionist kind of argument. It seems.
Yeah, it goes straight there. And it's interesting because you go into this mode every time I've spoken about race in a meeting. Like, that's when we need to really discuss and understand that there's a distinction between race and class and da-da-da. Like, I'm a socialist.
Yeah.
I am in a Marxist organization. I understand the importance of class in this whole thing.
Sure.
Why is that your time to say, well, now I need to let Sarko know what's going on?
Yeah.
Or, we just need to make sure it's very, very clear that there's a race aspect to this and not, or there's a class aspect to this and not the race. Like, I know the race is there, but but the class. I know
because, well, do you feel that my sort of making that argument consistently is a kind of indication of something?
Yeah.
What is it? What do you think it's an indication of?
I think just kind of run-of-the-mill white fragility when it comes to discussing race.
Okay.
Yeah.
So white fragility meaning the idea that white people seem to be increasingly weak or have thin skin when it comes to criticisms of white people.
Not even criticisms of, or not just criticisms of white people, but really just when we're talking about this race thing, when we're going on about it, it makes you uncomfortable. And you can't speak from that particular perspective either.
Of uncomfortability with race?
No, of being not white, right?
Sure.
Like,
sure.
When we're talking about white people or the experience of racism, we, meaning me, all black people, all people of color, it's like you're not really in that. And so now we need to talk about class so you can be included. Especially what I've seen with these white socialists on the left. Again, I mean, these white socialists, like, it's like you're dedicating your life, your whole perspective, worldview is looking at the oppression of the ruling class on the working class, and you are in struggle and we're all getting oppressed together. But here in 2018, a lot of the conversations, a lot of the people who are on the left very much focuses around identity-based oppression. Because it's wholly relevant. The
non-socialist left, you mean? Or do you mean the socialist left too?
The larger left.
Okay,
yes,
gotcha,
I would say the larger left.
Yeah, okay.
And so how do you get yourself into that? Because especially if you're a white male, I mean, a lot of this regular identity-based oppression, you're just not dealing with. You try to understand, you sympathize, but you're just not there. But when we talk about class, then you're in it. Then you're included. So
yeah, I mean, in some ways, are you saying that socialism and these ideas of class-based oppression as the sort of the hitting point as compared to a racial or gender-based or some other kind of based kind of oppression as your foremost thing that you are cared about is a sort of refuge from the non-identity, the sort of people who don't want to be white identity politic people, who don't want to be Richard Spencer, because Richard Spencer to me is the epitome of white identity politics. And so those of us who don't want to be Richard Spencer, but recognize oppression, may find a home in socialism because it allows us not to have, to find a place where we can also feel like we're in the oppressed group, where if we were to engage in identity politics based on the power dynamics of American identity politics, meaning that there are white people at the top and everybody else in some hierarchy below that the identity politics of the white is, I recognize my position of power and privilege and I'd like to keep it, thanks. That those of us who don't want to argue that will find a place in socialism. Is that kind of what you're saying?
I mean, I don't think so much it's you're a white guy, you care about, justice and liberation.
And dare I say the truth?
And then the truth. And the truth, trademark it. Truth by Kevin. And so, you're a white guy, you care about justice, liberation, and you want to join an organization and you feel like you're being pushed out or you're feeling uncomfortable. and maybe say another type of more just progressive organization, not necessarily lefty. And so then you go to a socialist meeting and they're talking about class, and it kind of makes you more comfortable. I mean, I don't know if that's necessarily what I've seen in my short time of being a part of this community. I feel like, of course, in the new wave of people who have joined these socialist organizations, which I am a part of, I think that's more diverse and younger and all of those things. But I think generally what you see are just, honestly, a lot of white guys who just like kind of have stuff in common. Like, it doesn't feel like they're running from something and then they go to socialism. I mean, a lot of the men that I see who are socialists, serious book readers, very intellectual. I mean,
there's a type.
There's just a type.
It's like a socialist guy.
Economics, there's just a type. I don't think people are necessarily white guys are flocking to socialist organizations because they're like, okay, well, this is where I can, be oppressed and have people, feel it with me. I just think it's a certain type, honestly. Yeah.
And so the sort of, I think what I would say, I think one thing that would be helpful is part of the reason I think that when you had said in one of the receipts that you had too, you had said to me that you didn't appreciate my it's like tone and word use, or so it was something
delivery,
like that. Yeah,
I mean, just,
and then I kind of responded with maybe some pretty flat humility, but I also think the same thing of you, right? That was kind of like my response. I think and that's the sort of real bitchy kind of way to say it, but I think which is a hard thing to do with text. I want to just plant a flag with the idea that reading tone into text is very difficult because you don't know what the person actually intended, and it's amazing when someone else reads your own text back to you because the tone is usually very different. And I think that one thing that I put a flag on it, and maybe come back to it, is I think the social media and the text-based conversations that most of us have that are atonal, and we don't have the face to read and all those kind of nonverbal cues that we've taken millions of years to develop with each other, and really we're help structure our societies that are able to to like achieve what we've achieved, is partly because we can read tone, and when we have to look into someone's eyes, we tend to give them the benefit of the doubt. When we don't, or we don't know who they really are, we tend to think everyone's an asshole.
Right.
And so I think that also tends to bleed into our social situations. And I think that as you look at the gradations of generations coming down, Generation X has less of a problem with this because most of them were talking on the phone to each other and reading as much tone as you can with that, or talking to each other. You get, Xennials and millennials who are doing more interactions via social media, and you get Gen Z who are doing almost all of it with not only social media but fucking emojis, where you read intent and tone into an emoji. And so it is in some ways, I think, actually, I would just say becoming worse in our tendency to what I would call act in bad faith, another legal term, but that we just don't give each other the benefit of the doubt. And I think that that's part of, honestly, the general misunderstandings and confrontations that people are getting into. But I think it is actually part of the disagreement between you and me, that we aren't both giving each other or not acting genuinely in good faith. We got to give each other a little bit more credit, and I'm guilty of it too. The reason I'm saying that is because I think, for me, the instance of white fragility, I think, comes out in my significant desire to like not be prejudiced, to not and to not like take things for granted. That's part of the trying to act in good faith, but to not be able to say, to feel confident in being able to make any judgments about anybody before I talk to them, or at least see them engage and see something about them individually. So when I personally have a sort of instant like disgust kind of feeling when anybody talks about, especially groups of people, with wide strokes. So, if somebody were to say just, X race of people does X or is like X, my first thing is I get a little. It's like somebody punched me in the stomach. I'm just like, oh no, like that is at best a stereotype, and at best stereotypes are true, but at best, and that usually leaves a lot out. And there's always, in the case of, especially because there's billions of people, the diversity within groups of people is sometimes more than diversity between groups of people. So we don't really have a good place of confidence. Nobody does, to be able to judge groups of people or individuals based on their group identity. Now, we do it all the time. It's part of our social systems, and it's part of how you navigate the world. But it doesn't mean that those are actually ultimately justifiable in my mind. And so you have, I think, and you have a tendency to use that kind of language, that white people are just X, or fucking white people, I can't, and it's a very wide brush. And I know that you're a fair-minded person, and so I know what you mean is like this kind of white person, or, people who act like X, who are predominantly white, ergo white people are X or whatever. I know that's what you're doing, but it still has that punch me in the gut type of feeling when you do that. And it's not just you, it's anybody. So I don't want to personally attack you or whatever, but I mean, if I heard somebody back home in Minnesota say, all black people are like X, it's like, ugh, I don't like that. It makes me feel gross because it's almost always wrong. And I think that my reactions of attempting to bring in the class dynamic or to try to jump in is usually because I feel like somebody's got to go, but not, like, it's not everybody, like, not all white people are like that. And as a white person, you want to go, yeah, see, look, like, not all white people are like that. But that's the exact same thing that I would do, or I would expect anyone to do, if they heard somebody say the same thing by some redneck saying some shit about black people or Mexicans or anybody else, right? That, they're just a bunch of whatevers, or like they do X or anything like that. You're like, how the fuck do you don't know that? And so that, I think, is part of it, that when I hear that kind of stuff, it's very difficult for me not to go, hey, like, just like I have to check myself, so do you. Like, and and I don't do it very well, obviously, because it's not communicating that. It's communicating something completely different. It's communicating a white fragility. And I think that, or at least that's the way that you're taking it. And I really do think that I do understand what white fragility is. And I, being from a place that's predominantly white fragility is very common. People don't want to admit that white people could possibly be, as in general, say people from Europe, or the European experience was not fraught with blood and violence and slavery and war and all these terrible things. That you'll have a lot of people who, you start talking about that and it's like, look at all the great things we've done and that kind of stuff, right? And I would never engage in that kind of activity because that's disingenuous, and it's that, I think, is an expression of white fragility. But I think when I'm responding to what I see as, and to be blunt, a prejudicial comment, a comment based on prejudice, I want to fight it, there's like the fighter in me, the very deep fighter in me goes, don't give a fuck who it is, start throwing punches. And so even to people who I know are not intending what I think, what I'm sort of taking in that acting in bad faith, then I start punching, it's like, well, wait. And then I jump in and start talking about the truth, which I still want to talk about because I do think the truth is important. But I think what that means is also a question. But what do you think about that?
Okay. Two main things. First, saying, oh, white people like this or blah, blah, blah. I get that just doesn't make you feel comfortable, because you don't like to make any of those kind of broad strokes with people. What you don't understand is just how much black people talk like that. Like, and how much people of color kind of talk like that. Like, obviously, if I say something like, I don't even know about white people, some usual casual shit like, oh, that's Caucasian, it doesn't carry all this shit that you have with like that all this stuff that you're like you feel about it. I get that. But this is so much a part of my experience and the experience that other Black people are dealing with. And we talk about it in that kind of way all the time. I mean, Black people you don't even know, we're going to talk about this race dynamic in one kind of way or another. White people this, or man, you know, how Black people this, all whatever. I don't really expect you to get that 100% because what white guys are you going around being like, oh yeah, man, Black people are like this, right? Because it's a totally different thing when me and my girlfriends are talking about like our white coworkers and some problematic shit that they did, or some white person in a store did some stupid shit to me and that really irritated me, and it's like, oh, that fucking white bitch. It's a different kind of thing that we're discussing than if you and your white homeboys decide to be like, oh yeah, God, it's fucking Black chick, or it's fucking Black people, or look at these Asians. And
what is the difference?
That white people are at the top of the social stratum here, and we're all at the bottom. That's the difference.
Okay.
There's a clear power dynamic, and that's the reason why it sounds even different, right? Like Black people can kind of, you know, cut up about white people or white phenomena in a way that doesn't sound quite as right when white people do it. Why? It's because this prejudice has different power. The prejudice that Black people are going to have, that has way different power, not a whole lot of power compared to the prejudice that white people have. Like, all races are talking shit about each other. Believe me, we know that white people are talking shit about Black people. We know that Black people are talking shit about white people. Like, these little things, they happen. It's okay. Everyone has prejudice. Every single person.
It's okay.
Okay. But the prejudice has different power. And that's why there's a difference. When white people are prejudiced, it means we don't get paid as much. We don't get employed as much. We don't get housed as much. We are in jail more. We are getting arrested more. If I call the police right now because I have some shit going on, I need, I don't know, someone's in my backyard or some shit, whatever. That interaction is going to be way different than if you call the police and you have a problem. It is because that difference in power is what makes the prejudice that Black people have and us just cutting up about this and that different than the prejudice that white people have.
All right.
And so I get that like that irks you, but if you even understood how casual this kind of talk is and how much this informs the way we talk and the way we think, and again, I don't want to be monolithic with all Black people, but honestly, it even shocks me the kind of the shared experience and what that means and the shared language that'll be amongst Black people. Okay, it makes you feel uncomfortable, but you're just coming from a whole different perspective on it, and I get it. Like, you're just saying either way, no matter which direction it's going, this is not a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a difference between the idea and the understandable. I agree with you that prejudice is real and all kinds of people are prejudiced. But I don't agree that because that everyone is that way and there's a power dynamic, that the prejudice of the disempowered is okay. That's the part I don't see.
Is okay.
It makes me uncomfortable.
Clarify that word, because what does that mean? Is okay.
Justified.
Yeah. Okay, that's because that's what you said before, is justified.
Yeah.
See, the reason I disagree with you on that is because you have no idea what every Black person in this country carries as a result of the racist terror we have to face every day. And so when you have a lifetime of experience of white people not treating you well, doing shitty things to you, saying shitty things to you, of having to deal with microaggressions and racist antagonism in the workplace, when you're just taking a damn walk, when you're trying to go to the grocery store, when not only you have a lifetime of those experiences, but your friends do. and your family do, and your partners do, and even Black people you don't know. You just look on the media and you are seeing what's happening to you as a people. There are so many, and it's very sad because I see a lot of my friends and other young Black people like me that I know getting traumatized and bitter from all of these experiences that we're always having.
Yeah.
And so after a while, why would you just openly trust white people? Why would you not have prejudices? You have a whole lifetime of experience telling you that there's going to be some kind of shitty interaction, or there's going to be some kind of misunderstanding, or they're just going to piss you off.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I'm like, I disagree with that. I think it's totally justifiable, because after how many years am I supposed to just like not have this affect me, or not be, let me just give it another chance. All of this lifetime of experience that I have and this knowledge that I have, let me fly in the face of that because, everyone deserves a chance. Of course, you don't go up to people and start decking them in the mouth and shit like that. Mm-hmm. We all like to go and function in society. But to say that these prejudices are not justifiable is very short-sighted to me.
I think that, so I understand, like, you're right that it is absolutely, there's a logic to holding prejudice against people that you so often have bad encounters with. And that if you have a number of bad encounters, doesn't have to be everyone, but you have a number, and it starts to rag on you. It starts to build up in your mind this vision of a kind of person that fucks with me.
And it's also multiplied by, again, the experiences of your friends, your family,
right.
of seeing how Black people are treated on a larger scale in our society.
Right.
That also is enforcing those prejudices.
Sure. And yeah, so all of these things snowball together into this giant, like, animosity of like, what the fuck? Like, fuck this and fuck you, right? Now, I completely understand that whole trajectory. Mm-hmm. And it is absolutely understandable that, if nothing else, as a defense mechanism, as a coping mechanism, as a way of dealing with the understandable and fairly constant feeling of frustration that you have to be Black in the United States, that you sort of feel justified in saying, yeah, it's white people, and that just, there's a logic to that. The thing that I think is a really, really important thing, along with the not acting in good faith, is for us to be, and this is unfortunately where you're going to go back into the truth, but the difference between what's understandable and what's justifiable. Because I can completely understand why a person who has a multiplicity of experiences that are negative, that involve a group of people, may begin to harbor bad feelings about that group of people. But I can absolutely see how that connects not just with people, not just with yourself, but with people that you know, and even people that you don't know, that you can connect those experiences. And the reason that I have I do have a problem with the idea that it's justified is that you can make the same argument about racist white people. That if they have just based on their own particular experiences, a number of encounters with Black people or Mexicans or anybody who's not white, and each time they have that experience, either because of circumstances not in their control, maybe the other person is prejudiced or even racist or just a piece of shit or whatever, and they have these interactions over and over again, that builds up in that person's mind that there's a justifiability for prejudice and anger against this group. And so that develops into from prejudice to racism. And so if you were talking about eventually getting to a society where people are not people's experiences are not by and large determined or significantly influenced by the color of their skin or by some other kind of factor that they communicate, non-verbally, what they wear or any kind of that people aren't, if we're getting to a point where people are not judged based on those things. If we have the idea in our culture that because of differences in power dynamics that are partly historical and definitely presently impactful, that if you're not in that position, your feelings of prejudice are therefore justified, we're never going to get past it. Because unless you have, and I don't know how you'd get a sort of equalization of people if one group is allowed and given justification to their prejudice against other people. I just don't think that it's a project that can ultimately work in the long run, because you're maintaining, racial tension dynamics, or even just dynamics between groups in society. So if one group gets to have justified prejudice, then the continued tension and the tribalist kind of feeling that all human beings have, doesn't seem to be diminished. It seems to be increased. And so that's kind of the reason why I totally understand, and that's why I want to fight against it. But I can't see that as justifying what I think is going to be stopping us from really making progress.
I mean, I understand your perspective. I think that justifiable isn't a black and white, a 0 or 100 kind of thing. Like, it's not justifiable. Like, racial animosity towards white people due to a lifetime of experienced racism doesn't justify, assaulting someone or robbing people or doing shitty things like
violence.
That. Any kind of violence that hurts people.
Yeah.
But does it justify me being just generally, does it justify me not wanting to go to certain bars in DC because it's going to be all white people and I just don't want to deal with that? I don't think that's I don't know. I don't see this big that is just not justifiable. It is kind of justifiable. I know. I kind of have an idea of what I'm gonna have to fucking deal with if I go into this kind of space.
Would you feel the same way about a white person who said they didn't want to go to a predominantly black bar?
So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
The reverse never just works the same way. It's never a 1-to-1 where well, what if white people did it?
Why not?
Does this culture, does our history, does our media, do our narratives tell all of us that white people just are dirty, dumb, lazy, inferior, less than,
but
ugly?
I don't think our culture does that to black. It doesn't tell people that people are just. Do you think our culture today tells the general everyone that black people are just dirty and useless? You think so?
Those exact words. We are very much put on the lower end of things through our media all the time, and especially black women. We have to deal with that all the time. So yes, there is a cultural narrative about black people that does not exist for white people, and I mean this has come out of having to maintain the racial structure in our country from when it started.
But I wonder, is it a difference? Is it because I think there's definitely a difference in the way that black and white people are treated generally in the culture.
And
right?
portrayed.
Sure, exactly. The question I have is it the situation where you think that black people in media or, in the cultural projection, whatever form, is the disparity that they are not given as many opportunities or shown in the positive kind of lights that the light that white people are, or is it the case that they are in media in demeaning roles and in obvious and intentionally communicative subservient roles? So is it
sometimes. I mean, I think it's both. I really think it's both. Absolutely.
Because and this is I will have to say that I'm not a huge consumer of what I would consider the sort of standard media. I don't watch televisions, and I don't really look at magazines, and so all of the advertisement communication of norms and those kinds of things. I mean, I'm fairly disconnected from those, so I don't see. But like, so I can definitely see how there is a sort of general media or even cultural preference for white, on a cover or in a movie or something like that. It's like most often than not going to be with somebody who's white, right? And so black people are not getting the kind of equal advantages or even equal opportunities that I think white people are getting. And Hollywood is just one representation of something that I think exists in widespread in the society. Black people in general do not often have the opportunities that white people do, right? And so
are
that's
not portrayed or not seen as valuable or as competent as white people are. I mean, these things. Do
you think that has changed at all in recent times, or do you think it's been consistent through and through?
Lighter skinned black people have a little better. I mean, racially ambiguous is.
So you don't see something like Black Panther as a contradiction of a maybe a norm, because that is a movie about.
I mean, it is a big movie, big cultural moment,
yeah.
And contradiction of a norm. Certainly, I mean that's a big Hollywood movie,
yeah.
And it's black as fuck. It's wonderful. And I'm not saying there's been no progress made, and it's like it was back 50 years, 100 years ago, but it's still there.
There's still a disparity.
Oh, it's still there. And those ideas and those narratives are still being communicated to people. So when you're saying, oh, well, what if the white person says the same thing? It's not the same because of how we are placed in the society. And all of the things that I'm ingesting about white people, that I'm experiencing about white people, they're not told to me through media, or they're not told to me through my teachers or my bosses or whoever.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas these shitty, disparaging views about black people, a lot of those do. I mean, I'm not saying they only get communicated through media and all those things, but primarily, I mean, the cultural oppression of black people is also a thing too. And then it has a long history of blacks being purposely put in a negative light. A lot of these stereotypes that we have come from that long history. So that's why I'm not going to equate those two things.
But so that's why if a white guy were to say to his friends who's saying, hey, we're going to go down to X bar, and the X bar is a predominantly black bar, but it's maybe one close, right? Mm-hmm. So they're like, we're going to go to the corner bar, and the guy goes, I don't want to. It's too many black people, right? There are very few people who are going to go, all right, that makes sense. Like, you do you. I don't think that a lot of white people, like as a white person, as a, let's say, a culturally aware and somewhat having, I mean, it's maybe hard for me because I feel like my consciousness I've had a consciousness raising moment where I am aware of the fucked up background of a lot of these sort of things. So if I was ignorant of it, maybe I wouldn't have this reaction. But if one of my friends said, I don't want to go to that bar, there's too many black people there, I'd be like, what the fuck are you talking about? Right?
Oh, Kevin, and that's you, and that's good.
Mm-hmm.
That's not like a totally outrageous thing. I've even heard of that happening. Like, what? Yeah, no.
But isn't it fucked up? You might have heard of it happening, but it's still fucked up.
I mean, that's not going to make me cry myself to sleep. Like, okay, you don't want to go into like a super.
I mean,
and we can go through like 1,000 different individual scenarios, and this is something that, like, and you're not going to like this, but white people, white socialists, when you're having kind of these conversations, they like to get into these like deep, nuanced hypotheticals about shit, and I get it because we're trying to tease out some concepts or tease out our argument.
It's an attempt to show that the wide brush isn't necessarily fair.
And I get that.
Uh-huh.
But the reason why I don't care for that, because in one of the branch meetings where you were talking about the black capitalist in a black tinted out limo with a white driver, and you're going into this, because I don't give a damn about that one situation, because when we zoom out, what is actually happening here?
Yeah.
What like, okay, yes, that one scenario or this one situation or your one experience doesn't quite match up with what I'm saying or with some of these experiences that you know happens. But when we look on a wider scale, we see that this is happening not just on to one person or to a handful of people, but to thousands of people, millions of people.
Yeah.
So I'm just, I don't know. I'm not like, I understand. I get you. And as a person who is dedicated to justice and is very intellectual and really looks into these things and really wants to find that trademark truth by Kevin. I get that these wide swaths and all these little scenarios, they're important to you. But when I look out on the broader scale, I see me and my people getting shitted on all the time. And so I just don't care about these one-off little scenarios that you can make up. I want to look back to, because there was a second part of what you said that I wanted to respond to when you were saying like this discomfort that you get when people say, oh, these people do this, these people do that. And so that's like the fighter, they like, you're going to respond to that, to anyone, and say that's not legit. So that meeting in December, when I said that I'm starting to understand why Black people and people of color don't flock to these socialist organizations, what broad stroke about white people did I necessarily say for you to go on the offense? When we spoke about the gun control, when it was the gun control meeting, and I said there's some kind of element of whiteness here. I can see you wanting to go into that. I can see that. The
issue of whiteness is something that I
mean,
personally find problematic.
Which is so crazy to me, because I'm like, that is a phenomenon. And if you can't recognize the phenomenon of whiteness and what it does and what it means, you're just missing a big part of this. I mean, even in the Erica Gardner post, like, what wide brush was I painting with white people there? It wasn't there. Like, your disgust and distaste for identity politics, it's a little too sensitive, my friend. And one of the things that I brought up when we were preparing for this was, what is and is identity politics? Yeah. Right? Because you attempt to paint a lot of things as identity politics, kind of like anything dealing with identity-based oppression or identity somehow gets labeled as identity politics. Like, identity politics is voting for someone solely because they're a woman or solely because they're Black, regardless of their political platform, right? Identity politics, especially what you see in these activist groups, are, I have this identity, I suffer more than you, and so I should whatever, like, I don't have to be a part of organizing this event or some little bullshit like that. Like, right. That
or I deserve a speaking spot before other people, or
nothing based on their politics or their actions, just like, I'm this identity, give me some money and ask for my opinion for everything. Okay, that's identity politics. Let me tell you what identity politics is not. Distrust of white people is not identity politics. Not readily listening or trying to follow white people is not identity politics. Not wanting to be led by white people and organizing spaces is not identity politics. Bringing up race issues in branch meetings, Facebook posts, or wherever is not identity politics. Like, I'm not insisting some kind of power on you because I'm not really trying to listen to what the white guy at the meeting is saying. This is just a response. Like, this is, again, this like whole life experience of interactions that you have with white people. If I'm at a Black Lives Matter meeting and the white guy is insisting on speaking and I just like am not feeling him because he's fucking white, that's not identity politics. Like, it makes you uncomfortable. I don't know what the name for it is.
It sounds like prejudice.
But, okay, prejudice, fine. I mean, because everyone has it, and it's a small bit of prejudice. Like, I don't want to hear what this guy has to say. I've seen too many of these white guys who don't know how to shut up and just want to talk on and on at the meeting. And we're talking about some shit like it's the first time he's even showed up. And I just don't want to hear it. That prejudice could be against anyone, really. Like, we all have prejudices against all kinds of people. Just because it's a prejudice against a white person doesn't make it like, oh, this morally bankrupt kind of viewpoint. It's just like, no, I just don't want to hear from you. Like, I'm done with hearing about y'all. Or I don't want to hear this from a white guy. That's not powerful to me. That's just not vibing with me. And there are a whole host of experiences and feelings and processing that's going to go into that. That's not necessarily identity politics. And understanding more about the Black experience will just, I think, maybe help you realize that more and more and be able to pick out what exactly is looking at identity in a way that you put everything else aside and anyone can come to you with any kind of garbage political platform, but as long as they're Black. That is a little different than just like, I just generally don't trust white women. Like that, and it's not like I'm going to, like, a white woman speaks to me and I'm going to tell her to shut the fuck up and slap her or some shit like that, or just turn away or be rude or be nasty.
But some people do.
Some people do, but that's something different.
Okay.
Like me and my friends, we're not going up and just like throwing
That's a
bows.
line crossed, you'd say.
Yeah, but that's a line crossed with, regardless of race.
Right.
If it's two Black women and one of those women decides to go and throw a bow at the other woman, like, that's a line crossed no matter what, regardless of race there. So, racist based violence isn't, I'm not excusing that by any means. But again, like me, like, I have a general distrust of white women. Like, they're shady, just like there's too many things that happens. That there's a whole dynamic I can't even get into right now. But most Black women that I speak to, if any of them are going to hear this, they'll know what the fuck I'm talking about. Just what it is. Doesn't mean that I go around and, like, any white woman speaks to me, I'm not even gonna
But
but I'm not gonna just be totally trustful. We're not gonna be getting into
what could possibly end that mistrust.
What could possibly end it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I mean, that's a big question, because I think there would have to be some larger scale changes that I would see. Like, if it's just like a coworker, and not like a coworker that I'm close with, just like a coworker or a neighbor. That personal interaction, if they're cool, then they're just cool. Like my roommates.
Despite being white.
Right. Two of my roommates, white women, they're great. Love them. And, like, trust them enough to live with them. And certainly know that they are good, genuine people.
Are they included when you say white people are problematic?
I'm not calculating, like, the millions of white people and saying every single one of them, like, even this whole, like, not all white people thing, not all men,
not all Black people,
which,
not all Mexican people, not all anybody.
Yes, but when, especially if we're talking about, like, race-based oppression, when I say, like, white people this, or if we're talking about gender-based violence and oppression, men are this, because I do that a lot too. Fucking men this, men are this.
It's another thing that
which I know you don't like it, but I see, and maybe if you want to get into, like, some kind of deep, like, debate about it, where we're really discussing getting down to it, but there is a larger phenomenon of men being violent towards women, societal issue. And I'm not saying men in their inherent nature, they just, like, have some beat women or press women gene inside of them. I'm not saying that. There's a larger social issue here, and it kills us. At the very least, it has us experiencing harassment almost every day. And as a woman who faces harassment almost every fucking day, that's the low of it, or the least of it, to us literally being killed, losing our lives because of the violence that men have against women here. A lot of the times when I'm saying men are this or men are that, I'm highlighting these larger issues. That's what I'm talking about. Okay, you're getting offended, or you just don't like the sound of, like, oh, like you're saying all men, but I feel like you're just trying to strip away like the larger issue here. I'm just trying to talk about this larger issue and bring attention to this larger issue.
That's interesting.
And so, like, one example I think of is like in America. America has an obesity problem, right? It's just facts. There's a lot of obese adults in this country. And so if you're out in the public health world or whatever, just generally in society, the kind of public health phrasing you're going to say is America has an obesity problem. Now, you and I are two adults sitting here. We're not obese. And so do I feel the need to be like, oh, okay, well, I'm not obese, and like I know some friends that they're not obese, and actually, if you look at the population, it's only like 40% of the population that's actually obese, and and it's really important that you. No, you're kind of like stripping away the larger like message of like this is a problem, and we need to do something about it.
Yeah. So okay, cool. I really like that because the idea of stripping something out. Okay, I see what you're saying. The thing that the flip side of it, what I'm seeing you doing is actually putting too much on, right? So you see me as taking something out, and I see you as putting something on because you like. So I'm not the analogy you made about the obesity thing. I think it's slightly different because in that case, human beings sort of can either be obese or not obese, and then if you say there's an obesity problem, it means that human beings are in general not healthy because they're obese, and there are too many of them, hence it's a problem. But if you're saying something like men perpetuate violence against women, right, or like that men are beating women
or manipulate,
right, whatever, anything like that, right? I think it's for most of us. I think a lot of us hear what you're saying as some number of men, right? Because I will admit not being 100% on the statistics, but I don't believe it's a majority of men who are engaged in acts of violence, right? So it's not a majority. It is a minority of men, but it doesn't mean it's not a sizable number, and it doesn't diminish the fact that it's a problem and that millions of people go through instances of sexual violence, domestic violence, all kinds of violence perpetuated by men towards women. That's absolutely, it's not to diminish, to say that it's a minority of men who do that is not to diminish the fact or the experience of all the women that it does impact. But it does go against the idea that it is helpful or indeed justifiable to make claims about men in just as men period perpetuating violence against women. It is some number of men perpetuating it against their people that they know or women that they do or don't know. That's a different kind of explanatory language. And I think that what's important here, I think, is the use of language and how we interpret what each other is kind of saying. And I think it goes back to the acting in good faith. Like I think it's really important for all of us, but particularly both of us in this particular conversation, but even on the issue, to like give some credit and go, okay, I could take this like he was a fucking dickhead, or I could take it like he meant something, so I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt, right? If we engage in that, I think the potential for misunderstanding is a lot less. But
well, so so gender-based violence, like this is a further extreme of like gender-based oppression that happens in this country.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really walk around saying men just kill women.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds fucking crazy a little bit, right? Like men just beat women all the time. All these men are doing. No, that's not what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about the everyday things that men do to women.
But you'll say something like, "Ugh, men," right?
Right.
Yeah.
Like, because when like some fucking asshole decides to scream out of his car at me or to be pursuing me in a way that is way uncomfortable,
it's
way
as if
unwanted.
all men did it to you.
It's not as if all men did it to me necessarily, but we live in a larger society in which these kind of interactions are acceptable and are preserved every day. Like
who in God's name said, like, are you talking about like catcalling? or something like that. That's acceptable.
Catcalling,
That's acceptable. Stalking women. None of that's acceptable. Who says that's acceptable?
We live in a larger society.
But who's perpetuating the norm that stalking is normal?
Has there ever been a time where a friend of yours, and maybe not you, Kevin,
Okay.
maybe not you,
So it's not all.
but where
men.
you have seen a man
Mhm.
do something that is inappropriate at the very least
Yeah.
to a woman?
Yeah.
Did you say anything? Did you
Yeah.
stop him?
Yeah.
Every time when you hear
If I had the if I had the ability to do it, and it wasn't in like what I would consider serious physical danger, I have. So I think it's important to combat those, to not be silent in the event of sexual, like
and I think
witnessing
that's
sexual
good.
violence.
I think as a woman
Uh-huh.
who dates men, or just as a woman who like lives in this society,
Mm-hmm.
there's a big ass part of this that you don't see and you just certainly don't experience. Like, of course, for you, it's like, oh, well, not all men. And I'm not saying there are no good men out there.
Mm.
But as a woman dealing with men and understanding and having to be subjected to a lot of these interactions almost every single day in big ways and small ways. I mean, it's not just catcalling on the street.
Mm-hmm.
After a while, you start to recognize just like some of these patterns, some of these phenomenon that happen with men towards women.
Mm-hmm.
And that's usually what I'm talking about when I'm saying, oh, men. I'm not over here trying to dissect. Again, I mean, what was the previous example that we just went through? We can go through all different nuanced examples and blah, blah, blah. Like, we can look at thousands of examples. But when we zoom out, what do we see?
Mm-hmm.
We see a society in which there was just a runner in D.C. who was killed by some crazy man. I mean, I think he had some mental health issues. But even in Iowa, that runner who was killed because she told a guy no thanks when he hit on her. Well, and that isn't just a one-off. Like, if we look at these trends on a larger scale, it's like there's clearly an issue here with men and with women and women experiencing gender-based violence. I understand, like, if we want to have a debate about this where we sit down and really talk about it, then we can go into stuff. But when I'm just hanging out with my girlfriends, or I'm just having a drink, or I'm just whatever, living life, and I'm just like, there's another thing that a man has done, not some inappropriate thing, something that I have to I'm having to deal with again from these men, that we're not having that conversation. And I know that that's like your mind, like that's just where you go. Like this Erica Gardner post very much showed that, like, you're over here, you see the statement and you're like, I'm trying to have more of a higher level debate, discussion about this. Let's get into it, whatever, and have a Marxist viewpoint of it. I'm not trying to engage in that discussion with you when I'm just having some exasperation about men. Like,
I mean, I get that.
So I think I'm understanding your point and you're understanding mine, and that's why we're having this conversation. But I'm never really trying to get that deep into it when I'm just saying something very casually. And people say these things casually, and it comes from a valid place. Like, again, I am a woman. I'm a black woman in this country. There's all kinds of terrible bullshit that I have to deal with from men on an individual level and on a societal level. And that experience that I have is going to be different than a white woman. And that's going to breed some animosity in me, because she's not dealing with some stuff that I have to deal with. I mean, all of these things are like constantly bouncing off of each other. It's really hard to slice them all out.
Yeah. Here's an honest question. I know that you maybe aren't wanting to sort of move up to that, that the level, the sort of thing I can't help but doing, and like going like, oh, but like what, like let's think like 30,000 feet about this, right? And I understand that, and I understand that part of the reason why is because you're just trying to live your life, and you're encountering all like example after example and experience after experience of the negativity, right? And the sort of the frustrating elements of this. And so it's pretty fucking hard when you're constantly dealing in the muck to just kind of like float out of it and like not worry about it and think of some other, read Marx or whatever, right? I get that. The thing is that if if you don't do that, if you don't, even as a kind of escapism, mechanism or whatever, then it's a constantly recycling kind of system where you're like perpetually stuck in this constant reaffirmation of the negativity of the current system. And so, like, for me, I mean, I think part of doing this podcast and doing the reading that I do and trying to kind of disconnect all of these things that even make me pissed off and that I don't like, and I hated a few weeks ago having to stand up to the guy who was twice my size at the liquor store for touching the worker's boob. But he did. And I was like, what the fuck? Right? I don't like doing that. I didn't like having to think about that and how often that happens. I know it does. It's way too often. It fucking sucks. I know it's the truth. And obviously we all deal with these kinds of situations. But in some ways, the sort of coping mechanism, the way that you deal with that is either to, what I would say, to kind of maintain the position of like resentment and frustration and anger, like, this is just constantly fucking happening, and like these fucking people are just, what's wrong with these people, and it's very easy to, after a number of crappy encounters with people that look the same or act the same or in the same area, you go, people from X or who look like X or whatever like X, man, they're fucked up. I don't deal with those people. I hate it. And that is a kind of coping mechanism. But I just don't think it's a helpful one. It's not something that I do actually think you can ultimately find a good like grounding for. It makes perfect sense as a coping mechanism, as a way of going, you know what, I just don't fuck with white people because I've had enough encounters and I don't like it. And you say, so I'm just not going to fuck with white people. But that's not something where I don't think anyone's going to look at that and go, well, that's good. I'm glad that you just decided that you're not going to, like, it's understandable. It's like, I can understand, must suck to deal with that kind of stuff. But man, I really think that if we immediately kind of go to the 30,000 feet and go, we do kind of want to live in a society where nobody has to feel like that we have a society that is to such a degree integrated to such a degree that we can genuinely not be oriented or societally influenced based on these characteristics and can be genuine individuals, such that we'd have to judge everybody as genuine individuals and couldn't make these wide kind of swaths against people. And so I think that, what I want to, I guess, communicate is that I don't misunderstand the perspective that you have and I am absolutely, I don't understand the nuanced, actually lived experience of the actual phenomenology, the experience of the phenomenon of being a black woman in America now, right? But I can't see how the dealing with it by maintaining what feels like understandable prejudice is going to be ultimately a successful tactic to moving forward. And if we want to move forward, we can't engage in tactics that maintain us where we are. We've got to find the things that take us away. So for me, staying in the muck doesn't do that. Going to 30,000 feet, trying to find the places where we're the same and where we can get together, that seems like the place we want to go. And in some ways leads to the why can't socialists recruit more people of color? Well, the idea from a lot of socialists is, well, yeah, we have this great vision and this 30,000 feet level that communicates to everybody. And that might be true, but we aren't communicating to people, I guess, where you are,
So
but that's
two things.
That's a long thing. Sorry.
No, it's fine. It's how you do. It's how you do.
Just want to be understood.
Two things to that. So, okay. First, for me personally, and I'm only speaking for me personally, like, calm down. Like, I don't walk around just hating white people.
I don't want to give that message either.
Right.
I don't think that you're wallowing in constant frustration.
Right. This muck and
sorry.
this. I mean, like, I certainly have my prejudices against white people.
Yeah.
I recognize
that's where I get frustrated.
More even coming into my consciousness as a socialist, understand more and more this phenomenon of whiteness. But like, it's not like, oh, there is no white person that could ever get like, it's just not like, and
but
also
that isn't what I'm arguing either. I'm
right,
not saying that you are,
but and I'm only speaking for me personally for this, so I just want to say that, like, okay, yeah, I get it. Like, I'm gonna always be talking shit about white people. That's just what it is.
You're never gonna change. There's nothing that can get you to change.
If white people stop doing this white shit, then maybe. But until then, here we are. But and this is one of the questions that you have, like, you know, where are you from, or like kind of like a little bit of info about you. Yeah. So about me, like, as someone who is a daughter of African immigrants and who's grown up very much around whiteness, I'm not over here like I'm done with them. It's over. I can't see the beauty. I can't see the goodness in people if they're white. I can't ever be friends with them. Like, that's not the case. My classmates are all white. A lot of my friends now are white. A lot of my friends in college and high school were white. A lot of my coworkers are white. I've got 2 white roommates. Like, I understand that there isn't just one white person or one thing that is white people. So I can understand those nuances. And while I'm still going to recognize y'all bullshit, recognizing that and calling that out, it doesn't mean like, oh, just staying in this muck, you know, just in a way that progress can never be made. That's just not where I am. So that's talking about me personally. Second thing is that I am not going to, it's not my place and it's not your place to dictate how people are processing the trauma of the oppression that they're experiencing in this culture. And, oh, well, if we keep doing this and blah, 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 you know, some people, that's just where they're going to be. Or I'm not going to say, oh, well, all these experiences that you have, just so we could get towards progress, then you really need to look past those things. Like, I don't know what another person is going through and how they're processing their identity in this society. You know, an example that I think about a lot is my experience as a Black cisgendered woman and the experience of someone who is a Black transgender woman. And there's a whole different experience there, even though we're both Black women in this society, very low on the fucking social totem pole, economic totem pole, political totem pole. We have such varying experiences. I can't go to her and say, hey, but like, you know, just like try to get past all that trauma that you've been experiencing in the society. You know, you just trying to be yourself, and just so we can get to progress. I don't know what you're fucking going through. And if you make the decision that there's a certain type that you don't fuck with, certain groups, like you don't fuck with cisgendered women, because there are some trans women who are like, the privilege that I have in this society as a cisgendered woman means that you get shitted on. And if you have some animosity or resentment towards me because of that, or you have just had too many experience with cisgendered women shitting on you in one way or another, and you decide that that's where you're going to be and that's what is healthy and happy for you, and you're able to keep your peace that way, I'm not going to dictate anything on that. Like, we can't be doing that. And it's you as a white cisgendered man, married, few degrees, lawyer in DC, living in this gentrifying fucking ward, making good money, living your good life. How can you tell somebody who is at a totally different perspective, totally different experience, that, oh, but just put it aside so we can make progress? When we're having one-on-one discussions like this, I'm not saying that's not fair to bring up or that shouldn't be something that should be said, but trying to impose this upon all working people just for the sake of this ambiguous success of defeating capitalism, when they are experiencing trauma on their everyday experience, like, I don't agree with that. I mean, I get you, like, I understand a way to progress is working together no matter what. Like, the solidarity of the working class is critical in order for us to be able to win this thing. But I'm not about to impose on certain people the way they should be feeling and processing their experience, especially when I don't know anything about that.
Even if it results in animosity towards a group of people. See, I
what
guess,
can I do?
Well-
Why should I be trying to, like, it's one thing if that's your friend. Like, if I have a friend who is seriously fucking racist and it's like hurting them and it's just problematic, and I want to try to, like, hey, maybe we should work on that. That's one thing. But the way you're saying it is like, any working class person, anybody, you should just, like, if you just go to them, well, why don't you just be nicer? Why would you have animosity? Like, you are not recognizing how the experience can really shape a person and what makes them feel safe and what makes them not really feel safe or not be welcome.
It just feels like then we don't, then I don't know where progress can be had then. It seems like if we can't provide a place for people to, potentially get out of a sort of cycle of resentment or anger or frustration or whatever, or social anxiety or any of those kinds of things. If it isn't that in some ways that we are presenting to people a sort of different perspective that gives you hope, then what are we doing? It seems like there's I think it was a bit of, I don't think that I was making the argument that, like, I have the prescription for everyone, right? It was a conversation between me and you, and people are different. They're going to deal with things differently. I understand that. But at the same time, it isn't as if, it seems to me that what a lot of people are missing, and I think this pretty genuinely, is things like hope and vision and a way out of these feelings of resentment and animosity and social exclusion and anxiety and frustration and all of these things that are very common, and exacerbated by things like social media and all that kind of stuff. And if saying something like, it seems to me that there is a kind of cycle that will, in my view, almost indefinitely perpetuate. It'll just go on forever if we don't rise above it. Then if we can't even say that to people who are suffering, then it seems to me that we don't have the ability to communicate to enough people in the working class and to connect people in the working class, because the only reason why we haven't, in my view, gotten to a socialist phase already is because the working class has been so divided. And this idea that, look, it's okay to, because of your experiences, have resentment and animosity towards different groups so that you don't fuck with this particular group. That's a representation of a disconnection of working class people. I think we need a connection of working class people. And if we can't say that we have a kind of vision or a perspective that accounts for your experience and takes and says your experience is valid, right? But the feelings of resentment maybe aren't helpful. What's actually helpful is finding ways to unite and fight against those kinds of things. Like, if we can't do that, then I just don't see where our project could ever succeed.
Yeah, that's a really large 30,000 feet kind of perspective, or kind of
but it maybe it's what's needed.
Yeah. I don't know if we're necessarily there yet as a proletarian force of, like, we all are really trying to get on this shared vision. Like, I'm not saying that's not necessary, but I guess I don't see the working class is very divided.
Yeah.
And it takes us kind of working together.
But how are we going to work together?
In some very serious ways. But I don't know. It's just too big. But
I follow your logic. Like, we do need to get together if we're ever going to succeed. But if we have this dynamic in our, even within proletarian culture, of serious divisions where people just don't work with other people because they don't trust them, or they've had too many bad experiences, and it goes a lot of different ways, then that working class is never going to get connected. Or you're going to maybe maybe the best thing is like to have some like token people who then are able to be enough where, you know, there's enough feeling of connection where people are willing to like generally work together. But to me, I mean, we got to find ways to unite, and you know, saying to somebody, I can't tell you that saying that writing off a group of people is maybe not the best, you know, way to kind of the most positive way to deal with something. I just don't think that we have anything to offer people that will give them hope, which is what seems so desperately needed.
I don't know. I guess I don't really know how to respond to that, because I'm not saying that that's necessarily wrong. I'm trying to think of like what everyday interactions in which we're having those kind of discussions, or
right.
we really need to have consensus on that.
How we communicate with people so that we can feel their pain.
It's all one-on-one, you know, and it's all how you show up. Like, I think that building movements is a really great way to be uniting people together.
More organizing, less activism.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely more organizing.
Yeah.
And less activism. Whatever level that might be on. I mean, and this is happening all over the world. People are coming together and are able to bridge those differences, that they have a common goal. And so I guess I don't think that someone's prejudices against a particular group of people, while it is harmful or it can be harmful to them or to others, I don't think that's necessarily like, just individually we would all just put all those things aside, then we could finally get together and defeat capitalism. I don't know. There's just some more mechanisms that are going in there. I almost feel like I'm talking about a very kind of like everyday experience. And you're always got this like bigger, like, okay, but how do we all unite against capitalism? And it's like, I'm really just trying to live every day, and there's bullshit happening, and it pisses me off, and I process it a certain way. So I don't know how to like answer these bigger questions of like, okay, but how do we give people hope? Right. I mean, there's so many ways and different things and a lot of those are outside of our control. Like
it's hard to know.
I can't go to somebody I don't know and convey to them why they should have hope and why they should drop their prejudices that they have about me, so that we can unite together and do these things.
Do you think that would be powerful to have, though?
I mean, I think that requires some massive changes in society and how we communicate if we're having everyday discussions like that.
But then there's like a chicken and egg, right? We can't wait for the change to be able to get us to have the kind of change that we would need to see the change that we want to see. Like, we gotta, for lack of a better term, force it, or at least bring about the conditions of the change that we want. Right. And so in some ways, to me, shouldn't we be communicating to each other, those of us that have, I think, a perspective of hope, in the kind of way that we would want people to, like sort of all people? I mean, that's, in some ways, that's part of the genesis of my frustration with a lot of the way that we have communicated about this particular issue, me and you and the branch, all things considered, because I think it's not been the kind of thing that we would want to give as an example to other people about how to deal with these issues. It's like that we are miscommunicating, and talking past each other and assuming things about each other that aren't the case, that are resulting in disconnections and a feeling, and the sort of feelings of disunity and not being connected and part of a whole. And so, I guess part of it, and I think the value of this conversation, is that we're giving an example of how even if you have those disagreements, you can still have a conversation that's able to bridge some of those gaps and be able to create understanding, where if you just sort of wrote somebody off or weren't willing to engage in that kind of conversation, you wouldn't have those understandings.
Yeah, I hear you there.
You know,
I mean, I just feel like it's so individual.
Mm.
You know, you and I having this discussion here, this is after months of like trying to have this discussion, but also this is after months of us just having different experiences. Like,
yeah,
the Kevin in December 2017 in my living room is a little different than the Kevin that I'm sitting next to right now.
Sure.
And there have certainly been experiences over the past year or so.
Yeah.
And conversations that you've had.
Yep.
I know that you've had with your wife, at least. Different people you've talked to.
Right. Doing
and
the
even,
podcast.
And even, sorry.
It's all good.
This experience between you and I, and having these conversations back and forth.
Yeah.
Having kind of this disagreement and having to come and sit down with each other. And even our like non-confrontational, non-heated,
Mm-hmm.
you know, when we're just hanging out.
Yeah,
when we're just
yeah,
having drinks,
right.
when we're doing whatever.
It is possible, ladies and gentlemen, to be able to do that.
That individual, like I'm saying, if that's your thing, and I know that's your thing, like
Mm-hmm.
to have hope for a better world. And I hold that same view too.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the only reason why I'm really like, I'm here doing this socialist shit, even
Right.
identify as a socialist. I believe in a better world, and we need that. But this is just a very individual. I understand you wanted this to be on a large scale, societal scale. We can do the change. We can try to make as much change as we can on an individual level. And even you and I talking like this, like I could have been wrote you off and said, fuck him.
That's true.
And I'm done with that.
Yep. You're right. I appreciate you didn't.
No, and I didn't take it because I think most people, I mean, we're humans.
Yeah.
If you're seeing eye to eye, like you said, if we're actually talking to each other face to face and really trying to have an understanding, there are things that can happen there.
Yeah.
I just, this is extrapolation to like, okay, anybody, everyone have these conversations so we can break down these things. I mean, I'm not saying it's not a bad thing, but not only do we not know the answers to those questions, but neither of us have the experience of a lot of people where they can't come back from that.
It's true.
I have seen people who like, they are just bitter, jaded, done.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate to see because I understand how it can happen.
Mm-hmm.
There's only so much trauma that you're going to take, I think, before you're just like, I can't, I need to protect myself from this.
Yeah.
But that's not everybody.
Yeah.
We do what we can. There are some people where like, they may turn around, but it's not going to be us saying, hope and believe in the truth and come with us and be capitalist. Like, so we just do what we can. You've always got these big questions, big. But it's just like,
sometimes you gotta
let it go. I don't know.
Get
just
back
like,
down to reality for a second.
Do what you can.
That being said, I do think that as important and as valuable as the conversation is just between you and me, and it's important for me as a person, and I think for you as a person, and for our friendship, that we have the conversation, and even for like what we want to do organizationally and as socialists. I think it's really important that especially we as socialists have these conversations and come to what understandings we can. But at minimum, I mean, I think I have a better idea as to what difference there really is. And I mean, it's somewhat similar that I sort of kind of knew about, but it's much more well defined in my mind. And I know that I'll be able to come out with this communicating better with you such that we can not be mired in unnecessary conflicts with each other, which I think is valuable even just between you and me. But one of the reasons why I wanted to also have this conversation recorded and available to other people is that I think there's a lot of people who want to have this conversation with people or are feeling the conflict that you and I are both feeling and maybe haven't heard or don't have the person that they could talk to where they might get that other perspective. And to hear two people who are who have differences of ideas or coming at an issue from different sides can have a conversation where they don't bitch at each other, they don't yell at each other, they don't throw fists, and they can actually do so in a way that leads to progress, you know? Because I think that's one of the other things. We see so many people yelling at each other, so many people fighting, or so many people having these, you know, very socially destructive interactions with one another, that any example we can give of two people having a good conversation, especially about some of the most important issues of our time, like race and class, but also how we even just connect with each other as human beings, but also human beings across different groups and tribes, for lack of a better term, that, you know, if that helps a few people have a little bit more hope, frankly, or at least to be able to think about how they might want to have that conversation, that's a good thing.
True. No, I am happy that we've had this conversation. And you're right, because this ends up just being a human interaction, communication thing. I mean, we're all human.
And when you said that, that's
like,
that's the
and
thing.
I'm
it's
understanding like
I really believe
the
that
friction is just, it's just the way you're processing what I'm saying and how I'm processing what you're saying.
Exactly. Yep.
Now I want to So I want to end this off or like wrap this up with a point that you brought up before.
Okay.
Of why Black people and people of color don't join socialist organizations.
That was the question I wanted to end on. So perfect.
So this whole thing that you and I have had leading up to this conversation, imagine, I was going to say imagine being Black, but
do my best.
You're Black, young, just coming into consciousness about capitalism and socialism, and go to participate in one of these socialist orgs and come up against this class reductionist bullshit arguments and just this friction that's happening, this friction between white people and Black people that happen out in the regular world, just outside of your socialist meeting too. And imagine, I mean, you and I in the same branch have had this. Yeah, we discussed it and hashed it out, but imagine how many times people of color and Black people have had to deal with this, and it's like, I don't want to be a part of this. I don't. This guy said some shit that pissed me off, or he's just trying to minimize my race experience. And especially a lot of people, they come into a socialist organization because of their identity-based oppression and understanding that,
right.
And then they just develop that analysis. But when I'm coming in, that's my perspective, and imagine having someone just shit on that very quickly coming in, or just trying to peddle some kind of perspective to you of like, yeah, race, but you know, class, man, class. What? That's not resonating with me.
Yeah.
I had an experience when I was first like checking out different socialist organizations, where I was speaking to a comrade from ISO. I'm gonna put the ISO on blast. Good comrades in that branch, in the DC branch, not saying they're bad people. But when I was first looking to join that organization, and I was sitting down with an older member, and I remember making some comment about white men or something like that. And I can't even remember exactly what the comment was, like something about white man and privilege or something. And that comrade said, no. He said, nope. White men experience oppression too, and it all comes back to a class thing, and so that was just like, no. And I remember it felt like a slap in the face, but like, you know, whatever, young, you don't, like, you're unexperienced, you're coming to this organization trying to see what this is about, and you just assume this person knows more than you. And of course it's a white guy too, so there's just that dynamic as well. It's always present. It just felt like a slap in the fucking face. And then there was a meeting that both he and I had attended. It was like a public meeting where a Black woman at that meeting had made a comment saying there aren't enough Black women in this meeting right now, and the topic of the meeting was very much relevant to material conditions of Black women. And so that was the comment she made at the meeting. And that comrade, when we were meeting one-on-one, he said, you know, that woman at that meeting who said that stuff, talking about there's not enough black women here, she was race baiting. She was race baiting. And I was like, what the fuck? Why would I want to join that organization? You know, when the first meeting I went to for SA, it was the anniversary of Fred Hampton's death, and Michael quoted Fred Hampton, and he even brought up the fact that it was the anniversary of his death, and Fred Hampton was on my mind that day. And I remember looking at him while he was saying this, and he was really trying to connect with me. That was way more meaningful to me. I joined SA shortly afterwards, but that interaction with that ISO comrade, what the fuck? Why would black people want to fucking join that? No. See, these mostly white, mostly male organizations, these shitty social dynamics that create divisions within the working class are present here too. And these organizations don't do anything to try to change that. At least not from what I've seen, including our own organization. Yeah. It seems like these organizations, as far as addressing like that there aren't as many people of color or black people in the organizations, that there's been a historical problem with that. There can be that recognition of like a historical problem. And what's the solution? What's the technique? What's the strategy so that we can really have a multi-ethnic, multiracial kind of organizations? What do they say? Recruit more people of color. Recruit more black people.
Yeah.
We're right. We've got the perspective. We're not gonna look introspectively. We're not gonna look at the leadership of our organization. We're not gonna look at the social dynamics that are happening there. Shit, I mean, not even do a damn survey with the people of color and black people in your own organization to see what's going on. No. Just recruit more of them. Because
by osmosis we'll just grow.
Somehow, right, exactly. It's just like recruit more black people, recruit more people of color, and then in the middle it's like question marks, and then at the end of it, multi-ethnic, multiracial, working class movement.
Just black people will go where other black people are.
Right, that's it. If we just bring them in, then that's good.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense.
There's no actual priority to really understand this phenomenon that's happening. And what we have experienced, you and I on the individual level, again, if we zoom out, what are we seeing? Mostly white, mostly male, socialist organizations. So this is certainly a reason why black people don't want to join this. This class-based perspective, this classic Marxist perspective that a lot of these white socialists walk around spouting off, it does not resonate with what we are experiencing. And especially in 2018, people are more than ever truly recognizing the power of identity-based oppression and what that means for experience. Now, I can understand the being turned off because sometimes it's just like too focused on that, and it's just only looking at someone's identity and that's it. But it's an important time, and it's affecting the consciousness of the general left, and that's where we're moving, right? Like, people aren't over here trying to negate the power of race or trying to like minimize that so we can talk about class. That is not where consciousness is going. And I feel like a lot of these socialist organizations, it's just old leadership, super white members, super white leadership. I don't know what's going on, but you're just not getting it.
It's like we should take advantage of the sort of the growing notion of intersectionality, right? These ideas about how these things interplay with each other, and to say that absolutely there are these different kinds of ways that different forms of oppression build into a certain person's experience. You know, a person who has whatever identities, but that we can say that there are all of those kinds of things, and speak the language that people are speaking as they experience those kinds of different forms of oppression, and in the notion of intersectionality, like be able to say there is an intersection there in that intersection there is also this class dynamic, and that class dynamic is in a different kind of identity that isn't based on what a lot of the identities are based on in these really bullshit forms of identity oppression, but it's a different kind of identity, and it has intersectional kind of qualities where it's actually, you find this class-based oppression on top of and within all different kinds of oppression. So now we have not only the recognition of your experience from the kind of identity that you hold, but part of that identity being proletarian. And the different experiences that I've had, but that I also have the same identity, right? We might be from different places, have different genders, have different, races, and have all of these different experiences that come together. But that part of it too, there is at least one of that we intersect at. Do you know what I mean? Like there's one where we go, oh, we have all of these different experiences, and I need to understand yours, and you need to understand mine, and we have a way to do that because we have one that, is the same. If we can speak that kind of language, the language of intersectionality, which is where the zeitgeist is and the place that are going, that's a way for us to move away from one or the other identity sort of politics, but into that notion of intersectionality. Let's understand how we're different, but let's connect where we're the same.
And here's the way to not communicate about that. I am pretty sad about Erica Garner dying. This is affecting me. And then you say, yes, and of course millions of women happen in this and class and nexus capriciousness. That's not how we communicated. Like you got the talk down right. And this is why I like at the beginning of this conversation, I was like, I don't feel that we have major political disagreements.
Yeah.
It's the way you're showing up. Like you know and understand race-based oppression, identity-based oppression, how that affects people, and you even understand, maybe more than I thought you did, but kind of just the human processing of that and how that manifests itself. And I think a lot of these white socialists, they're righteous. Like they want the end of racism, they want the end of capitalism, they want the end of sexism, they want the end of all that shit so that we can have a society in which we're all equal. But the way y'all walking about it, trash, mess, talking over, taking up space, not listening, and not understanding the perspectives of people who are not like you. Again, these organizations, I really started to understand it this year. If you look, zoom out, it's just a lot of white people who have kind of similar ideas about the world. Like it's a big ass social club too. There's a social aspect to it. And so it's not like, oh, I'm a socialist, so I'm also now 100% down with black people, know what they're going through on their level, know how to talk to them. No, you don't. And these organizations aren't really helping y'all do this. And bringing more black people into your organization isn't going to help, because then you're just going to have the black people spouting off the same bullshit and not being able to connect, or alienating some of those comrades. I had an experience this summer. I was talking to a comrade, white guy, in our organization. And I was expressing some of these frustrations that I have with these socialist organizations, just not being serious about really trying to understand this issue and build those bridges with black people and people of color. And you know what he said? He's like, oh yeah, like I hear that, I get that, there's this book written by this black Trotskyist that really touches on this and really goes through this. That's really good. He told me the name of the book. He told me the author's name, and the year it was written. It was written sometime in the 1930s. And he's like, yeah, that's a really good book to go and check out, try to answer some of these questions. And so when we're talking, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah. But in my head, I'm like, no, I'm not trying to read this old ass book from this dusty old nigga from the 1930s about what?
Yeah.
That is not how you build links or try to get people onto your side, or try to make them understand the commonality of our class status that we all share. What the fuck? That's your answer. That's the way you're going to try to address the things that I'm telling you. Read this old ass book from this old ass dude And yeah, that's that on that.
I think it's partially because we don't have a lot of black people who can provide good theories from that perspective.
You dug up a dude from the fucking 1930s.
Last time the communists had success, right? 30s, maybe 60s, but even then.
And it just blows me because, I mean, that's not even the first example of something like that where it's just like, read a dusty ass book in response to some question about race. It's 2018. What the fuck? And also, I'm like, you can't even like tell me like 3, maybe 4 revolutionary as fuck lines from it. Something that just like really resonates with me. Something that can say to me and other people succinctly that your organization gets it, that your perspective is very much inclusive and complex enough to incorporate my own individual experience in it and really make me understand and see the light of Marxism, the light of socialism, whatever. Not even like 3-4 lines. Because you told me the name of the book, and you told me the name of the nigga who wrote the book, and you told me the damn year the book was written in. But you can't even just deliver
what it says.
Y'all don't have it.
Yeah.
You cannot go out, even if you're organized, you cannot go out to people and tell them to read dusty volumes and
even the things that are written nowadays, right, on like race issues and stuff like that, even from Socialist Alternative, but from a lot of those people, it's the 30,000 feet thing that you and I were talking about, where it's like it's like there's lots of problems with black people, and then let's talk socialist theory for 300 pages or whatever, you know. So and I think like I don't think that we shouldn't not go into 30,000 feet, but we have to be able to grab people and connect with their experience,
communicate with working class, everyday
have
people.
Them have in that connection them want to come with you when you're going 30,000 feet, not to grab them by the throat and bring them up there, you know. And I think that's what tends to happen.
Yeah,
it's
you want to read this old ass book?
Yeah,
because I like to read books. Because I'm a socialist. A lot of y'all, you like to read a lot.
It's a lot of,
you like to talk a lot. You like to write a lot.
Now that's not a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing, but understand, not everybody is like, oh yeah, I'll read a fucking book.
If you can't,
I don't care what year
if you read a lot of books, that's good. If you can't synthesize it into a paragraph, that's a problem.
It's true. That's true.
You should be able to communicate an idea that if you like a book, you should be able to tell someone why you like it and why it matters.
3-4 revolutionary lines.
Not read this.
And we should make socialist material accessible to all people, not just like read this old thing, read this long thing. Like, it's 2018. Figure out how to reach people. Like, and this is a bigger issue just with socialist organizations in general. But this is what I was saying in December of 2017. I'm like, I'm starting to get it. I'm starting to get it. You don't connect. And even with the black people in your, I've had conversations of frustration with white socialist organizations, with black comrades in our organization. Like, just because you have us in there doesn't mean you got it right. And there's nothing that you have to do.
There is a difficult ground, though, between saying that in some ways that almost means that black people in socialist organizations do need to step up, you know, to kind of to say, look, y'all aren't doing this very good. But at the same time, to say that black people need to stand up is a white person going, black people need to stand up. So that, you know, it is a chicken or egg thing, but I don't think that makes it less true, right? There needs to be an openness in the organizations where everybody, but people that if your goal is to recruit more people of color, but black people specifically, then we need to hear from the people who are in the organization on what we can achieve. And if those voices are not being listened to, how the fuck is anyone going to assume that we're just gonna by osmosis get more people, you know, the different kinds of people to be interested in the organization?
Bring them in here, consolidate them super hard, so they just are straight up aligned with us,
right?
And then we've, you know, profit. Thumbs up. Yes, we got it.
Or find like the 6 or 8, you know, black people for whom they just go, oh yeah,
right.
That works for me.
They're with us. We have no problem with recruiting.
Then you're gonna have token black people like socialist organizations have had.
Yeah.
You know. So yeah, I do think that there is a problem though with what role black people in socialist organizations should play in educating white members of the organizations in getting a better grasp on understanding the experiences of black people as a way of priming people to talk to black people about what the socialist response to their experience is. And it shouldn't be merely saying that sucks, let's talk about socialism, to say let's talk about your experience and who you are and how you see us and people who look like me.
How do we build together? Because I mean, even if, let's say, just by a fucking miracle, SA is 1,000 people large, right? Let's say 1,000 black people join SA tomorrow. You think SA gonna be able to handle that shit?
No.
You think the cultural clash is not gonna happen? Right. They wouldn't be able to fucking handle that. So
I think they'd like to think they would be.
They like to think so, right? Exactly. We need to understand and recognize that these social dynamics, they don't disappear just because we all socialists. So yes, to bring all of that around, this interaction and the other things that I've seen are why you don't see a lot of people of color and black people in these organizations. It's not like, oh, theoretically you're off, or I mean, some people are certainly going to feel that way, but these micro level things, socialists are so concerned with the macro level things. And I get that, right? Yeah. We're talking about a whole economic system that's huge. But then it's almost like this assumption that these micro level things don't matter. And there is no movement that isn't built person by person.
Right.
And so how do we work with people? How do these person to person interactions help to build a larger movement where we can really take on the capitalist class? I couldn't think of a better ending than that, honestly. That's that on that.
That's a period at the end of that long sentence. Absolutely. So all right, that was really good. Good. All right, so that was my conversation with Sarko, and I hope you got something out of that. I do really think this is a conversation that more of us need to have, and we have to have the environment to be open and honest with each other. But I think if we do, we'll definitely get something out of it, and I definitely got something out of it. And Sarko and I have hung out since then, and I think we both really appreciate having had that conversation. So if you're thinking about having that conversation, you have these issues with some friends or comrades of yours, talk it out. It's an important way to deal with this stuff. That's this week's episode. If you like The Sensible Socialist, check out our social media presence, Sensible Socialist, on your favorite social media platform, or if you'd like, check out Patreon, sensiblesocialist.com.